Good morning, folks. Welcome to the Cliff Notes for the lecture on parole and prisoner reentry. Please keep in mind that this is kind of lumped together from our last lecture on probation. Both of these are considered to be community supervision. Remember, I was saying that about 5 million people in the United States are under some form of community supervision, and usually that can be divided into probation and parole. So, for parole, probation, pretty straightforward. Probation is a period of proving. You're proving that you're worthy of staying in the community. Parole is after prison. You've served your prison sentence. Please pay attention to the lectures to look at our truth in sentencing laws, which say that we have to serve at least 85% of our sentences before we could be paroled. In New York State, it is 6/7 of your sentence. It's a really weird number, I know. Parole by definition is, it's a French word meaning promise. And originally was used for prisoners of war. It was a promise not to engage in arms again. It was a promise not to engage in war again. So parole is still a promise. It's a promise not to engage in crime again. It's the same. It's very very similar energy there. And what's unique about the parole system is the fact that you have a parole board that decides your fate, but that parole board is not made up of officers or lawyers or judges. It's made up of community members. It is supposed to represent community interests. So community members can, janitor, teachers, nurses, whatever. So that is, and also that parole board determines your conditions of release. So conditions of release, which I'd spoken about a little bit when talking about probation, it's very similar. Most likely you have a curfew. Most likely you can't consume alcohol or drugs. Most likely you are trying to find a job. You're trying to stay out of trouble. And just like probation, if you violate those conditions, you will be sent to prison. In both cases, you have a prison sentence dangling over your head. For parole, it's pretty straightforward. You get a 10-year prison sentence. You serve 8.5 years. You are paroled if you have good behavior. If you violate the conditions of your parole, you go back to finish that 1.5 years. Pretty straightforward stuff. The role of a parole officer is very similar to a probation officer in that you are half police officer, half social worker. You have to make sure and police them and make sure that they're not violating the conditions of their parole. This is also a time where you are trying to help them find services, where you're trying to help them find get their lives back together. But that role of an officer, like parole officers are allowed to walk into your home without warrants. It's what makes the job so unique. They're allowed to walk around with handcuffs and firearm. And the logic behind that's pretty simple. A parole officer comes to your home at 2 a.m. And they say, "Let me in. I want to see what you're doing." It's not like, "Oh, give me 20 minutes to go clean up all my cocaine and other bad things that I'm doing." No, they're allowed to enter your home unannounced because they want to catch you in the act if you are doing anything bad, or to see if you're doing the right stuff. So it's a very unique job. So please pay attention to the case study assignment, the discussion questions. Otherwise, that's pretty much what I wanted you to get out of that. Again, parole is very unique. It's a very unique thing because of the parole board and the fact that parole boards are made of community members. And so pay attention to the video that I share with you, which I'm going to be looking at parole hearing. And that's about that. So otherwise, I'll see you guys next week.